Can't seem to remember to do that. Thank you, though. Okay. Okay. So, for 40 years, as our ancestors traversed the Sinai Desert, following the exodus from Egypt, miraculous clouds of glory surrounded and hovered over them, shielding them from the dangers and discomforts of the desert. The Jews, when they left Egypt, they were out in the desert, in the wilderness, vulnerable, open to the elements and wild animals and marauding tribes, and their protection came from several different things. One of the things that Torah tells us is that there were divine and divinely sent clouds of glory, which surrounded and hovered over them, shielding them from the dangers and discomforts of the desert. So we have been told to make a holiday of Sukkos, and the Sukkah is supposed to remind us of God's care for us, miraculous care for us in the desert with the clouds of glory. And today, even though we can't see it, we may think that it's a sturdy house and the Sloman's shield and all those things, which are really all important to be able to protect us. But ultimately, our protection comes from God. And going out into the Sukkah is a way to soak that in. Remember that God is not protecting us now any less than He did in the desert, even though then we were able to see the protection. Ever since we remember God's kindness and reaffirm our trust in His providence by dwelling in a sukkah, a hut of temporary construction with a roof covering of branches. Now that we're going to a vulnerable spot, and we're saying, we trust you, God. For the duration of the Sukkot festival on the Jewish calendar, that's Tishrei 15, today's Tishrei 13. So it means so the holiday starts Monday night. It's because tomorrow is the 14th and Tuesday is the 15th, and begins the night before. For 7 days or nights, we eat all our meals in the sukkah and otherwise regard it as our home. Another sukkah's observance is the taking of the 4 kinds. We take an esrog, which is a citron, a lulav, which is a palm frond, 3 hadassim, which are myrtle twigs, and 2 arovas, which are willow twigs. That's the lulav and esrog that we all have seen and used. On each day of the festival, except Shabbos, we take the 4 kinds, recite a blessing over them, bring them together in our hands, and wave them in all directions, right, left, forward, up, down, and to the back. Our sages in the Medrash tell us that the 4 kinds represent various types of personalities that comprise the community of Israel. As intrinsic unity we emphasize in Sukkot. So this is just an overview of Sukkot. We're not going to touch any of this stuff today. But it's the sukkah represents God's presence and protection for us, even if we can't see it. And the lulav and esrog is really a request of a way of requesting and recognizing God's blessing to us. But and we wave it in all 6 directions, all different directions we need our help from. But the 4 different types of species represent 4 different personality types. We're not going to deal with that today. Sukkot is also called the time of our joy. This is a little less known. Perhaps every holiday is a time for joy. There's a general statement in the Torah, we should be joyous on holidays. Depending on how you interpret it, every Shabbos is also a time of joy. But with Sukkot, it's specific, much more specific, and it says it 3 different times. Even though we think of it today more as Purim is the time for joy, Sukkot is the biblical time, in other words, underscored to be a joyous time. Indeed, a special joy characterizes the festival. And this is even less known. Nightly water drawing celebrations, reminiscent of the evening to dawn festivities held in the Holy Temple in preparation for the drawing of water for use in the festival service, filled the synagogues and streets with song, music, dance until the wee hours of the morning. So here's the deal. In concept and in what we'll call biblical and traditional ancient Judaism, there was a very, very obvious and crucial piece of the puzzle of Sukkot was that every night there would be massive dancing in the temple, and it was called Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Simchas Beis HaShoeva meant the joy of the drawing of the water. basically, of the drawing. What was that? Even though this is not a biblical thing, and that's a part of today's conversation. This is not a biblical thing, but it is from something that has been passed on to us from the times of the prophets. Whenever there was, when there was a temple, and there was an altar and offerings, part of it was they would pour wine, libations. Wine is significant. It was very significant then. That's what we make kiddush. When we do things significant, we use wine because it's a significant beverage. Wine was poured on the altar. On Sukkot, they poured wine and water. Water was poured on the altar. And for whatever reason, which is not 100% clear in the Torah, in the Torah, it's not mentioned at all. Even in the Talmud, it's not 100% clear what was the reason for such incredible joy from the pouring of the water. Now, when I grew up in West Orange, and I grew up in, there's a pretty strong Orthodox community there. Sukkot was, people had a sukkah, they had the Lulav Esrog, and that's it. In Chabad, because I've always had an ear in Crown Heights, and especially as I went older there was a big deal. And there is this night, it still goes on. If you go into Crown Heights from Tuesday night till the next week, 3 o'clock in the morning is like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Except more dancing and bands, and it's a very big deal. Now, it's not only Crown Heights, different communities will make like one night, whatever. There's no temple. We're not pouring water. And I'm telling you, when I grew up, it wasn't such a big deal, functionally. The Rebbe made it a very big deal. He said, this is what we do. Even though we're not pouring water, there's the joy element. And we're going to talk about it a little bit now.
Now,
yeah,
aren't the huts also from the fact, because I just studied this, so I know something.
Cool.
That when they were during the harvest period, they couldn't go back and forth to the village, so they would build these huts in the field.
It's a fair
it has to also do with the harvest.
It makes sense. It is a harvest time for sure. The Torah calls it a harvest time. It was harvest time. This is all of our festivals follow an agricultural flow. So there's, the early harvest is Passover time, and then Shavuos, the second of the 3 holidays of the pilgrimage holidays was the wheat and a lot of the fruit crop. Then everything was laid out in the sun over the summer to dry, and bringing it in was Sukkot. So there's definitely an agricultural bent. That particular theory about a connection with the sukkah, I've never seen before. It's definitely not scriptural. I don't think it says in the Talmud, but it's fair. We're Jews. We come up with new ideas. That's fine. But what the Torah says is that God says, I sat you in Sukkot as you left Egypt. It's not about the harvest time, because I sat you in Sukkot. What does that mean? So the Talmud debates it. Either they had flimsy temporary dwellings in the desert, or it means the clouds of glory. But what the way the Torah describes it, the scripture describes it, is it's not about the agricultural angle. It's about God's protection of us in the desert. However you want to read it.
There was no potatoes.
The 7th day of Sukkot is called Hoshana Rabbah, which means a great salvation, and closes the period of divine judgment that began in Rosh Hashanah. Special observances thereof, the taking of a bundle of wool branches. I'm not going to talk about that now either. So, I'll tell you what we are going to talk about. First of all, we are going to talk about this water service, like something very special about water. We're pouring it on the altar, and we're celebrating the water, something. Another important element here is that Jews disagreeing with each other has been unfortunately a very ancient tradition. In the times of the times of the temple, in the times even before the temple, where first of all, you see, even the desert, Jews couldn't agree with each other, right? It's always been that way. For thousands of years, no one denied that we got a Torah at Mount Sinai. That was just accepted historical fact, right? Christian believe it, the Muslims believe it, we believe it. That was accepted historical fact. But there was a very strong and tragic divergence in the Jewish community in ancient times was, okay, so we got a Torah, but who says we need to listen to what the rabbis tell us is oral tradition? We didn't get that at Sinai. So, and we've discussed this before, and I don't want to get too much into it now. The Torah itself, the scripture itself, as a legal book, is a failure. It's not a legal book. It doesn't have the stuff. And matter of fact, it's worse, because what it does is it sets up a bunch of different points, 613 mitzvahs, and says these are really important. Do A or don't do B, and then it doesn't tell you what A and B are. There no mitzvah is fully fleshed out. So how can you give me, as God gave us a Sinai? We're believing that God gave us a Torah at Sinai and said this is all really important. And you see in the scripture that's really all really important. And yet you're telling me that doing, mitzvah number 27 is really, really important. But how am I supposed to figure out what to do with it? You didn't tell me. You didn't tell me what to do. So, to use an example, we put on tefillin. Tefillin, the word tefillin doesn't show up, but the mitzvah shows up. It's use a different word, totafot. 2 different mitzvahs of putting on tefillin, one for the head, one for the hand. Doesn't tell you what it's supposed to look like. It doesn't tell you what color it is. For all I know, it could be pink. And for all I know, you could take parchments and bind them to your head and to your arm. It doesn't say anything about the boxes. So, and yet, it's a really important mitzvah. So if it's an important mitzvah, why don't you tell me what to do? So the Torah tradition, the Jewish tradition for more than 3,300 years has been that Moses told us exactly what to do. But this is the shorthand written part, and then he gave it a longhand. Actually, another example that's relevant to Sukkot. We use an etrog. The word etrog doesn't appear in the Torah. Actually, no word, no specificity of the fruit appears in the Torah. It says the pre-eitz hadar, the fruit of a beautiful tree. Go for it. What is that? An apricot. What is it? What am I supposed to do with that? But we have been using the esrog since Sinai. As a matter of fact, there's a question in the Torah, in the Talmud, how are they able to, where they had an esrog from. The idea is that we knew the interpretation, even though it doesn't say it. There were always rebels in the Torah community, the Jewish community, always. And part of the Jewish thing was, don't tell me what to do. It's a human thing. It's probably a little bit more on the Jewish end. So there were people who would say, something, we can't negate the Torah. We accept that we got that, but we get to interpret it as we want. I want to take an apple, not an etrog. Prove me wrong. I'm going to put on tefillin, but it's not going to be with boxes, and it's going to be in a red sack. Prove me wrong, because I know I have to. It's pretty clear from there that you need to put scrolls. So that split were known first as Tzedukim, Sadducees, and later on as Karaites. And it became a big split in the Jewish community, sometimes a very tragic split, because, at one point, and leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple, the Sadducees called in the Romans to be able to fight the more traditional Jews. They this was in Jewish life. It tended to be that a lot of the wealthier and therefore the upper echelon, and therefore they had more resources to do what they want, were more resentful of being told what to do and sometimes not to do what they want. And therefore, there were a lot of the more societal elite tended towards the Sadducees. And where I'm telling you this because it will be come up tangentially here, that for many years, especially under the Romans, because the Sadducees had a very strong hold, especially through Herod, there was they would buy and the office of high priest. So the high priests of Israel for a good number of years were Sadducees because they had the control. Okay. Now, one of the things the Sadducees absolutely dismissed was this idea of the water libations on Sukkot. Where does it say it? So this was one of the well-known splits between the traditional community and the Sadducee community, is that the traditional community had this big and very boisterous, loud celebration of the water libations on Sukkot, and the Sadducee says, "What is this new mishagas? It doesn't say it in the Torah." Okay, there's a few words of preface. Now let's see if we can get going. Okay. Text 1. This is from the Mishnah of the Talmud that deals with the holiday of Sukkot, and it tells us about water libations. Funny, I just mentioned it. How was the water libation performed? It tells you, a golden jug was filled with water from the Siloam wellspring. In Jerusalem until today, we are pretty sure we know what the Siloam wellspring was. That was a wellspring that brought water into the temple. And they were told, go get a golden jug. And a procession carried it up the Temple Mount. And when they reached the gate of water, there was a certain gate, an entry point into the temple compound, which was called the gate of water because it was so celebrated. And they sounded 3 shofar blasts. They would blow the shofar to celebrate. We can go here. There's a book over there. Welcome. They sounded 3 shofar blasts. A tekiah, which is the long blast, a teruah, which the way we do it on Rosh Hashanah is 3 shorter blasts, and then actually that's 9 shorter blasts, and another tekiah. No. So what is it saying? They're bringing the water into the temple for what was going to be the water libations was a very big deal. It was a big ceremony. They proceeded into the temple courtyard, and the priest carrying the jug climbed the altar ramp and turned to his left. There were 2 silver basins there, perforated at the bottom with 2 nostril-like holes. All the details are not so necessary for us. But here you see, because they would pour wine every day, they would pour wine on the temple. And here they were pouring water too. So the hole for wine libations was wide, because the wine is thicker, takes more time to go through. And the other hole for water libations was narrow. This way, both the thicker and the thicker wine and thinner water would flow at the same rate. The point of this is that there was a special, something unusual, given the norm of the year. There were water libations, pouring water, and that this was done with a whole processional. We didn't do this for bringing in wine. We did it for the water.
So this was not in the Torah, though.
The idea of water libations is not found in the Torah. That's correct. It is, our rabbis tell us that it's an oral tradition, and as you'll see, and I'm not going to, without getting too much into detail, in the Talmud, the rabbis show us a hint in the Torah for water libations on Sukkot. But it's a hint. You never would have found it if you weren't looking for it. Okay, we'll get there in a second. But yes, that's important to establish. It was not in the Torah, which is why that more, so I'm going to call it a secularized elite of the Sadducees, they didn't accept it. They said, just give me Torah. I'm not arguing with scripture from Sinai, but the rest of it is up for grabs. We're going to fight it. Okay. Text 2. They would ask the priest pouring the libation to raise his hand. For once, a priest poured the water on his feet, and the people pelted him with their citrons. This is an interesting piece of Talmud. As I told you, in the times of the Romans, this became a really big issue, a split amongst the Jewish people. And in the time of the Romans, especially under Herod, the Sadducees had, to an extent, the upper hand of control of Jewish society. And they're the ones who called in the Romans. So if you think about it, a Sukkot holiday in the times of the Romans, it's a pilgrimage holiday. Lots of Jews from all over the land, they're coming. Even though the Romans are in town, they're coming and they're filling the holy temple. And they're watching as the high priest is going to pour the water, which is a traditional Sukkot exercise. It will pour water libations on the altar. What happens if that priest was a Sadducee? Doesn't believe in the pouring of the water. So the Talmud tells us that once a priest, like kind of hiding it, keeping it low, his thing under the level of the visual level of the altar, instead of pouring it on the altar, he poured it on his feet. Whoa. So he didn't want to do this thing. You have a bunch of people there at a service, and what are they holding? A lulav and an esrog. So now the crowd, which is largely traditional believing Jews, they see what he just did. You know what they did? They almost killed him with their esrogs. They pelted him with esrogs. And actually the Talmud says that afterwards they called him, the Romans came in afterwards and had a bloody punishment of the Jews. So the rule became, we don't know who you are exactly. You're the high priest. It has to be, lift your hand so we can all see what you're doing with the water. The reason we put this there is because it is important for today's lesson to understand there was this divide amongst the Jewish people, and it had at its core, at least claimed at its core, a theological difference, a schism. The Jews believed in, the traditional Jews, we're going to call Pharisees, believed in that not only that God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, but that God gave more than the written Torah. God also gave the interpretation, because without interpretation, it doesn't become intelligible. It's not a usable document on a mitzvah end. The Sadducees said, we can't deny that God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, but it's up for our personal interpretation. We don't know exactly what went on orally there. Okay. Now, text 3, it's the bottom of 195. This is from Maimonides. The water libation on Sukkot is a law given to Moses at Mount Sinai. The Torah's written text contains only an oblique allusion to it. Those who rejected the Torah's oral tradition rejected this ritual. It's the question, do we accept only the written law, or do we also accept the oral tradition? The people pelted the priest who splashed the libation across his feet with their citrons, because he was a Sadducee, but did not believe in the water libation. So they felt it was disrespectful to the temple, and that's why they pelted him. Right. Text 4. I'm not even gonna read this inside, because it's referencing different Hebrew words. I just want to explain to you what it is. And this is on page 196. In the readings the Torah describes all 7 days of Sukkot. There's a paragraph. This is the offering that we brought. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And one of the things is, it says, this is what you do, and it's libations. So its libations is its libations. In English, there's only one way to say it, and its libations. In the Hebrew, there are some variances in the way it writes libations. So the Talmud says if you look at the letters and how they phrased it, there's an extra mem, an extra yud, and another extra mem. A mem, a yud, and a mem in Hebrew spells the word mayim, which means water. So there's a hint there. Again, I'm not going to read it inside because it's if we had a whiteboard that we're analyzing the Hebrew, that'd be one thing. We're not. That there is an oblique allusion to it, that we have this tradition of that there's a water libation, and the Torah, if you look at this code, it supports it. So now that we say on text 5, now we've established that there is this ancient tradition of water libations on Sukkot. Find another Mishnah in Sukkot. Says the pious and men of good deeds would dance before them while juggling flaming torches and chanting passages of song and praise to God. The Levites played on their lyres, harps, cymbals, and trumpets, and countless other musical instruments. Okay, there's an entire chapter in the Talmud devoted to what went on in this incredible celebration. And the language of the Talmud is a person who hadn't seen what's called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the joy of the drawing of the water, has never seen joy in their lives. And it was all night. Like I said, now it's in Crown Heights all night. It was all night. The city was alive. And there's a lot of talk about what went on there. And this is an example of it. The juggling torches, it was on wheels, but it was going on in the temple.
So at the barbecue, are you going to toss flaming torches?
It's our liability policy doesn't cover that. Text 6. Those who haven't seen, this is also from the Talmud, those who haven't seen the joy at the place of water drawing have never seen joy in their lives. Okay. So now we say there's something, we don't know yet why they're so, what are we so happy about? Water. Okay, good. But what's the source of the joy? What's the point of it? We know that, as I mentioned before, that the Torah says that Sukkot is the time of the apex of joy. And through the year, even though there were many different opportunities and oases of joy, Shabbos, holidays, and so on, Sukkot is mentioned 3 times. Sukkot is the time we call, even in our prayer, this is the time of our joy. We don't call Passover the time of our joy. We don't call Shavuos the time of our joy. We don't call Yom Kippur the time of joy. Sukkot is called the time of our joy because that is underscored. And it seems, looking at how our tradition was passed down, a center point of that joy was at the water drawing. So that's really what we want to talk about today. What was the deal with the water? But first, we're going to get into a little bit about the idea of joy. Joy is a general Torah thing. The Psalms tells us, not just for Sukkot, serve God with joy, come before him with song. A general Jewish attitude is we're supposed to be joyous. And if you see, this should be a happy community and a happy service. That's the way the Torah sets it up, and that's really, it's something we have to ask ourselves and strive for. 7b also in Psalms, on page 198, says, Israel, rejoice with its maker, children of Zion, exult with your king. Praise his name and dance with timbrel and harp, play music to him. Pious ones exalt in glory, sing praises while reposing on your beds. So it's clear, we say here, this is a general thing. This isn't specific to Sukkot. This is the idea of King David and the Psalms calling to us to be able to really be filled with a joy of life through our Judaism. And 7c, bottom of 198, celebrate with God, your God, for 7 days in the place that God will choose. This is about Sukkot. For God will bless you with all your grains and your handiwork, and you will experience only happiness. This is a verse about Sukkot. Now, that's Sukkot in general. And now we're saying, as the Talmud said, that the top of all that is Sukkot, is the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the idea of the water drawing. So what's the idea of the water drawing? So this idea, this thought that we're going to come to, we're going to pursue today, this is something that an angle that the Rebbe offered, and he started with the idea that we said before. Oops, 1 second, going in the wrong direction. If look at text 6, again, we did this already. Those who haven't seen the joy at the place of water drawing. Doesn't say those who haven't experienced the joy. Those who haven't felt the joy. Joy is not something you see, actually. You see joyous behavior. So he said, why that expression of seeing the joy and never seeing joy in their lives? So the Rebbe pointed out that in normal human experience, hearing is incomparable to seeing. When you see it, seeing isn't believing, seeing is knowing. Hearing, if 10 people walked in to this room now, one after the other, and each one of them tells us that they were outside and on Valley Road, there was an accident, and a Honda irresponsibly went into a Mitsubishi. You pretty much believe it. 10 people just told it to you. One after the other, they said the same story. We and someone else came in, an 11th person, and said, actually, I was there the whole time. That's not what went on. They make a good case. They might be able to convince you. And as a matter of fact, in Jewish law, I can be a judge on that insurance case, even though 10 people told me exactly what went on. You heard, you believe, you hear other information, you can change your perspective. If I was outside and I saw it, or at least I think I saw it that way, I can't sit as a judge on the case, because no one's going to tell me that I didn't see what I saw. So my mind is closed to other options. Why? Because it's so firm. It strikes deep. What you see is something firm, and what you hear is still open for change. The point that we're bringing this up here now is because seeing means it makes a profound internal impact. So take this now to a person seeing the joy at the drawing of the water, means that it was something. First of all, it's something that made an impact. What it's also trying to say is that what was going on, the joy was felt in a way that it's like the seeing thing. In other words, it struck very deeply. And if you think another thing also, sometimes words can't describe what you saw, because words are limited, and what you saw. Can I explain it? Either I can or I can't, but for me to hear it, for sure, that's only through words. Seeing is ingesting something, is taking something in that's beyond words, and sometimes can't even be described by words. So the idea of talking about the joy that was being felt means that there was an element of what they were experiencing and what was producing joy, which is beyond the normal equations that come up with that we build with words. It was something deep. Now let's go a little further.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The priest who believed as a Sadducee.
Yeah.
Okay, or Pharisee.
Sadducee. Sudoku, whatever that's just yeah.
He actually performed the ritual,
Mhm.
but it wasn't seen. that's why there was a rebellion from the crowd to throw the citron at him, right? They couldn't see it.
No, he didn't do the ritual. He
Oh,
poured
I
it.
thought you said he did it
It's,
low,
no, if you read it, he poured it on his feet.
his feet.
He's supposed to pour it on the temple, on the altar.
Oh, I didn't see that. I thought he was supposed to pour it on his feet. It's supposed to be poured on the altar.
Yeah, so but he did it low, so they shouldn't see that he was actually pouring it on his feet because he didn't believe in the ritual.
Okay, but he was by the altar.
Mhm.
Okay, so it could have been interpreted that he at least was going through the ritual of it, because if they couldn't see him pouring it on the altar, they certainly couldn't see him pouring it on his feet.
Well, apparently somebody did.
Somebody did, okay? But the crowd was reacting what they couldn't see, right?
I imagine if they all reacted, they picked up what was going on, but that's and he did pour it on his feet. That's the way it's been transmitted to us. I don't have
You know,
enough.
Okay, well, I was just saying that because seeing and hearing.
I hear you. I get it. So they didn't. He didn't have a fair trial.
No, he didn't.
Right.
And the other issue is surprising because he's a priest, right?
Yeah.
So one would think that a priest would be held in a certain regard, yet the priest did one thing that was questionable, right? Because they wouldn't have had him being the poorer if they knew in advance he was going to do
So
that.
you missed something I said before.
Oh,
That in those times, one of the crises in the Jewish community was that the Sadducees tended to be the more wealthy and socially elite, and they would often buy the office of high priest. So the Jewish community knew that there was always a danger of the person doing the things of actually being a Sadducee. So they were on alert for it
but he was still a high priest. That was his title.
because he bought the office. The assumption was.
So if someone could have the title
Mhm.
and carry on such an important ritual, there was suspicion that he might, that if he were a Sadducee, because there was rumors that he might do that,
Right.
and yet it was done anyway, where he was given the position,
Correct.
and there
Correct.
was a risk.
Correct.
But he bought a position.
So which is more important, the ritual or the respect of the fact that he was a priest? Obviously, not being a priest didn't carry much
The
weight.
most important is God and God's word. And God's word was that there is that this ritual should be done.
Mm.
There is God's word is also to respect everybody, let alone a priest. But that respect is not unchallengeable if that person is showing disrespect to God and to the Jewish community.
Now, that raises another question, though.
Yeah.
Would his fructification, so to speak, be equivalent to being impeached, or?
Well, the thing is, in that period of time, there was a lot of control by the Romans and so on. So I don't know if they were able to impeach him or not. I really don't know. That's one. It was in that period of time that the whole great court disbanded because they were neutralized. Text 9. Let's talk a little bit about joy.
Who is close to the Romans, and part of the Romans is, that's what happened.
Joy tends to overwhelm our boundaries. It transforms us. When rejoicing at a child's wedding or the like, our deepest self emerges. We can speak confidently in a crowd of social elite, even if we are usually bashful, demure, and reticent in public. We can dance with abandon, and this is on 201, without a shred of self-consciousness, even if we are supremely self-conscious. This is because exuberance brings out our deepest selves and bypasses all our superficially imposed limitations. Another example. Wise scholars who are usually reserved and hesitant to share their complex theories with students, friends, or family, can lose all restraint during times of joy and wax eloquent to anyone willing to listen. Joy also stimulates our most profound abilities. Concepts we ordinarily struggle to understand become suddenly clear to us when we are delighted, when we're in a good mood, when we're happy, especially under the influence of wine. Joy reveals the latent wisdom embedded in our soul's deepest reaches, enabling us to master the most complex theories. This is all because joy reveals our deepest hidden selves, melting away our usual artificial, self-imposed boundaries. Jubilance reveals everything without limit, both external gestures like dancing with abandon and internal capacities such as wisdom and kindness. So what we're saying is that joy tends to unleash a part of us that we often keep reserved, many of us. And the joy makes us break our boundaries. So it's a time of simcha. Now that goes, all joy is like that. Where we're going here, so let's see. Oh, one second. Oh no, it's okay. What's the difference between wine and water? Wine is something that naturally you enjoy because it has a specific taste. Some people like white, some people like red, a better bottle it brings more joy, a lesser bottle, less joy. But it's joy. It's uplifting. Wine, water, I mean, there's nothing. Water doesn't have a character except it's when you're thirsty, you need it. It's the elixir of life, but it doesn't have a specific character. And where we're going to go with this is that most of us, we as humans, we want to conceptualize and verbalize and package, why I love that person or what's special about this. But, if you say, if I try to explain to myself or to you why I love my child, I might be able to do it eloquently. But what I'm doing is I'm packaging something that's really not packageable. It's not just because of that. It's because of that also, because I can build some kind of composite estimation, but really, it's me expressing my gratitude to my parents. I mean, there are certain things that really, as much as we want to specify, the specification itself, it limits it. If you think about who you are, not here, quietly, meditation, think about it. If you think about yourself and your existence through a certain lens, you're already limiting it. Some things are really limitless and indescribable. Our relationship with God is indescribable. God is unfathomable. That's one of the things that we say that water, it reflects the divine. Why is mikveh with the water? Why is rebirth, spiritual rebirth through water, when water is so bland? But the point is, just as God is the source of life, water is the source of life because it reflects the indescribable divine. In the narrative of creation, God creates mass, undifferentiated, and it's covered with water. In the story of creation, there isn't anything that says God created water. As the scene opens in the beginning of Genesis, in the beginning of God's creation, the heaven and earth, it's the earth was covered by water, and then it says, "Let there be light." There you see God brought everything. It doesn't say there's no let there be water, because that was almost like a pre-creation state. It reflects the divine. And that's what we're going to get into here, is that the distinction between the wine libations, which the Sadducees agreed with, and the water libations, is the difference between having a very irrational, describable religion, and only that, and something that really transcends our relationship with God, which transcends definition. It has definitions, but at its core, it's beyond definition, and that's something very beautiful. It's an indescribable relationship. So let's get to 202, to text 10. A law about when to chant a blessing over wine and water demonstrates how different they are. When you always chant a blessing over wine, whenever you drink wine, it's something that the blessings before food are called blessings of pleasure. Whenever you're going to drink wine, it's a pleasure exercise. You always make a borei pri hagafen. We make a blessing over wine, but we only chant the blessing over water if we're thirsty. It's only if there's, because it doesn't. It's not a pleasure-inducing thing. It's great because when you're thirsty, but if you're not thirsty, the drinking of the water it's not something bringing you a specific pleasure. This is because water is not nourishing, has no taste or color, and refreshment is the only pleasure it yields. Wine has a flavor and inspires joy, so it's always pleasurable. Wine alludes to aspects of Judaism we understand and enjoy. Water represents aspects of Judaism that we perform only because God instructs them. Yet, since we are thirsty for spirituality, we exult in serving God out of obedience. It's like drinking water to be refreshed. So, I can tell you all the reasons that I love my wife. I'm committed to my wife, and hopefully it's the same. But they don't describe it either. There's a connection that really defies definition. In a way, the test of my commitment in a relationship is when she's asking me to do something that really doesn't make much sense to me. It's not crazy, it's not harmful, but it doesn't make much sense to me. And I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to do it, hopefully, with the same alacrity that I do with something that does make sense to me. Why? Because it's about the relationship. If she says to me this morning, I have a funeral later, she says, preparing for the holiday, just before the funeral, can you run to ShopRite and get me eggs because I need to prepare the holiday for the holiday? It makes perfect sense. I'm going to be out today. She's working. I got to go get the eggs. It makes perfect sense. But if she asks me something that doesn't make sense to me, I say, okay, so now do I say, but it's important to her. So then going through the exercise is not about, oh, A plus B, go see, I'm going to go do it. I like to be rational. But sometimes serving a relationship is that itself is the reason that I'm serving a relationship, and it's beyond that. So I don't understand. It's because how many times did I do that with my parents of blessed memory, especially as they got older? This is what you want. This is what you want. Fine, no problem. Because whether I think it makes sense or I don't think it makes sense, it's not about that. It's about taking care of something that matters to me. Text 11.
Why did you bring that example up while reading this section? Whether you're doing something because of a blessing or you're doing something because it doesn't make sense. Because in both cases, you're saying the prayer. So why bring it up that discussion about not doing what makes sense? Because you care about the relationship. You're not.
I'm not sure where your question.
I wasn't sure why you brought that example up now.
Which example?
The example of when you're in a relationship with someone, you do something because it makes sense. It's different than if you do it because it makes no sense to you, but you do it because of the value of the relationship.
I brought that up because I thought it helped explain what it says here. That's when I like to bring up different examples to try and explain something.
Why you pray over water versus wine, or when you pray over it?
Well, this wasn't just
Because
about.
those are powerful words. That's
This wasn't just about water and wine. The whole lesson is about a relationship. Water represents something. Wine represents something. Wine represents the rational, and the water represents the super rational. Yeah.
Is it also possible that this whole thing with the water is related to when Moses struck the rock to get water?
That's an interesting thing. It's not directly, but in the prayers we say, we do bring that up, because water is a pretty consistent theme. Listen, we don't need water all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty consistent theme in Torah, not just because, well, everybody needs water. It's water is a constant, and it is reflective of the divine. There's something very special about it. Well, for me, to sit by the ocean or in the river in the back, there's a certain tranquility that I'm not going to just easily find elsewhere. There's something to it there, and we see it ourselves that, the creation of a baby, first as the amniotic sac, in the whole mikveh experience is about rebirth, cleansing and rebirth. That's water. We take it for granted often, but as we know, water is a tremendous resource, right? That countries go to war over.
But
Unfortunately,
we're also made up of water. I think the majority of what our body is, I don't know what percentage it is, but it's high.
yeah.
So I think it's.
90% in children and 70% in adults.
So the point is, within us, we have the divine,
Right.
but we can't see it.
Right.
So the water then carries, that's something you could visually see.
You can see it.
When you're on the outside, but you can't see it from within.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. But I'm saying water also is, even though we can see it and you can feel it, it's less describable. If someone never saw water, never touched water, I don't know, you never touched, it's probably impossible. How do you describe it exactly? If they share a language, you can describe a wine. You can describe a sensation of a wine. What it is. Water is water.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing that up is that there's supposed to be an electrical field around
Yeah.
who we are,
Yeah.
and there's also an electrical field in water. So that connection is there. There is a natural joy when people go see the ocean or people see a lake.
Yeah.
It calms you, it makes you
Yeah.
feel better. But I think it's almost like a return to that whom we really are. We're made up of something, that we can't see, but it gives us a spiritual connection and comfort.
I think
More than wine, there's different ways.
I agree with you, and I think that's part of the mikveh.
You don't have to be drunk to enjoy the water or the mikveh. It gives a different type of pleasure of serotonin than ingesting wine, which the chemical reaction gives to you. So that connection with God and divinity.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Great. Text 11. This is from the Rebbe. Though we sing God's praises daily over wine, over in the temple, because there were daily wine libations, we sang them over water libations during Sukkot. And in Isaiah, we find a reference to this. We're instructed to draw the water with joy. Not in the 5 books of Moses, but Isaiah references the water drawing. Draw the water with joy. The water is neither flavorful nor sweet. The water is neither flavorful nor sweet. We drew it with joy. Our understanding didn't generate the joy. It was divine ordinance. It's that the point was not, oh wow, we've got great wine here and we appreciate wine. It's water, but it's a mitzvah of God. This is a bond. When I do something that God has asked me to do, I am connecting. I'm creating a bond with God. Therefore, it didn't need to be over wine. If God wanted us to rejoice over water, we rejoiced over water.
I see him giving a shrug when he says this. If God wanted us to rejoice over water, we rejoiced over water.
Exactly. That's exactly what was going on. And it's God's God. If my wife wants ice cream at midnight, that's what it is. When we rejoice because God commands it, the joy is as endless as God. No matter where we stand on the spectrum of Jewish engagement, this joy permeates and suffuses us fully. Being subsumed by God's endlessness makes our joy endless. And now, also from the Rebbe in text 12, this will be the last one. Jewish festivals are designed to remind us of the Exodus from Egypt. They are happy days because we rejoice over the freedoms the Exodus granted to us that we still enjoy. All festivals. However, that's all rational happiness and commensurate with how much we understand and appreciate these freedoms. Comes Passover. Let's say this is Passover is coming this week. We talk about slavery. We talk about affliction. We talk about the suffering our ancestors went through. We talk about the joy of the liberation and the wonderful and God's help. There's a story. There's an equation. It's A, B, and C. And now we celebrate. There's a very specific reason, and it generates a very specific type of joy. Some people relate more, some people relate less. We may change it through life in the way we relate to it, but it's because it's a verbal and mental equation, and it's rational. However, this is rational happiness and commensurate with how much we understand and appreciate these freedoms. The limitation of our understanding also limit our joy. It's only it only reflects our understanding. If we have a limited understanding, it's limited joy. If someone is not able to understand the whole Passover story, then it's going to have less joy. Now, no matter how vast our understanding is, it's still finite. That we will understand it better tomorrow only demonstrates that today's understanding is limited, because we can understand more and more. That's life is usually like that. The joy that results from this understanding is similarly finite. That it will grow tomorrow indicates that it is yet to permeate the part of our brain that it will reach tomorrow. Thus, it has not transcended all limits today. So, let's recap all this. Key points here. And it'll be on page 206, the final page of this book. In the temple, there were wine and water libations. Wine has a flavor and is enjoyable. Water is bland, but it is the elixir of life. Number two, some aspects of Judaism are like wine. What does that mean? We understand them, we enjoy them, they have a flavor, our sensors pick up different things that trigger us, that we enjoy, and we absorb. Other elements are like water. They're really indescribable. They exceed our understanding. We can't relate to them. Number three, yet surrendering to something that transcends us can be the most thrilling experience of all. It can stimulate us on the highest level and reach our deepest core. It is a transcendental experience. Number four, the Sadducees rejected this approach because they didn't want to cede control. They wanted every aspect of their religion to be meaningful, rewarding, and satisfying. They viewed surrender to something higher as blind obedience and brainwashing. Number five, we also emphasize logic because it brings immense meaning to Jewish practice. But we don't believe in rejecting what we don't understand. We see that, in other words, the super-rational as a summons to touch something greater than ourselves. Okay. Any questions? You can do that. If not,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you for the link, Rabbi. I don't know
Yeah.
what I clicked on, but it worked today. So thank you so
Thank
much.
God. They continue to work.
Thank you. Yes. Baruch
Yes.
Hashem.
Yeah, Herson. Enjoy your sukkahs.
Bye, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. You Bye.